Welcome to Modern Echoes, the podcast where we explore how modernist literature continues to live, shift, and remake itself in the art of today. I'm Leah.
I'm Mark.
I'm Anika.
And I'm TJ, and together we're your hosts for this series.
This podcast was created as part of our modernism project, but more importantly, it comes from our shared curiosity. Why does early 20th century literature still feel so strangely alive? Why does it keep resurfacing in movies, music, and art, even in places where we don't expect it?
Each of the episodes of our podcast is going to dive into one modernist work and trace how modern artists reinterpret it, how they mix old forms with the new ones, how they remix, quote, distort, criticize, and celebrate earlier modernist ideas.
And in doing so, we'll explore why these works still matter and why artists today keep returning to them.
In this first episode, we're focusing on the modernist poem that simply refuses to die.
The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
Yeah, T.S. Eliot's 1915 masterpiece has made its way into films, music, comedy, internet culture, and even the names of businesses.
Today we're asking some essential questions. Why does Prufrock keep reappearing, and what does this tell us about modernism has become in the 21st century?
We'll start with our guiding question. Modernists wrote for their own turbulent moment, so why are their works still being revived, quoted, and repurposed by artists in completely different eras?
Prufrock is perfect for thinking about this because it just keeps showing up everywhere.
And each time it shows up, it seems to me something slightly different, something shaped by the artists who used it, and by the world they're living in.
Modernist works, such as Prufrock, don't survive because they stay the same. They survive because modern artists reinterpret them. They remodel them to express new anxieties, new identities, and new cultural moods.
And to understand it, we'll walk through the three main topics. First of all, about the modern artists who reference Prufrock. Then we'll consider Christopher Ballantyne's ideas about modernism crossing into popular culture. And finally, we'll be considering Sarah Collins' work and how institutions shape what counts as modern and what counts as contemporary.
And finally, we'll bring them all together to understand Prufrock in simultaneously modernist, postmodern, and contemporary all at once. How exciting.
Let's start with the poem itself. Let us go then, you and I. Eliot opens with one of the most quoted lines in 20th century poetry, but the world he writes about is fragmented, uncertain, anxious, and self-divided.
And apparently, artists today love that energy.
It first shows up in film noir in Hollywood. In 1973, detective novelist Raymond Chandler references the poem in The Long Goodbye. Directors like Francis Ford Coppola weave allusions into Apocalypse Now, and Woody Allen basically builds entire characters who speak, think, and brood like Prufrock.
Even outside the film, it's everywhere. Meg Ryan literally named her production company Prufrock Pictures. Musicians quote the poem, satirists rewrite it. You'll even find it in memes online like the "Do I Dare Disturb the Universe" jokes on Twitter.
So why this poem exactly? Why Prufrock of all modernist works?
Here's my take. Prufrock is the original modern anxious overthinker. He's caught between wanting to act and being terrified of acting, between wanting to speak and fearing the consequences.
And in the modern world, that feeling hasn't gone away. If anything, it's gotten more intense.
Exactly. So when filmmakers and musicians reimagine him, they're not bowing to Eliot's authority. They're saying, this is our Prufrock now. This is our version of alienation.
Yeah, and each of these adaptations transforms the poem. For example, Coppola uses it to express wartime moral collapse, and Woody Allen uses it for his neurotic humor. A modern musician might use it to critique masculinity, or instead, social anxiety.
In other words, they're not repeating modernism, they're rewriting it.
We turn to Christopher Ballantyne and his chapter, Modernism and Popular Music.
Ballantyne argues that we need to stop thinking of modernism as something elite, something limited to intellectuals and the high art.
Instead, modernism appears across genres, across cultures, and across mediums, and every time it appears, it's shaped by a new context.
What I love about Ballantyne is that he flips the script. He says modern works aren't holy relics protected behind museum glass. They are living materials, rather.
And when modern artists quote or remix modernist works, They give those works new political meanings, new cultural meanings, and new emotional meanings.
In other words, when Coppola or Chandler or Meg Ryan uses proof rock, they're not imitating modernism, they're making modernism for their time.
It becomes modernism plus 1970s Hollywood, or modernism plus 21st century indie films, or modernism plus contemporary music production. Each combination creates a brand new aesthetic.
Yeah, and overall, Valentine demonstrates that the modernism isn't disappearing. Instead, it's evolving, because artists keep rebuilding it in their new cultural spaces.
Next, we turn to Sarah Collins in her chapter on the International Society for Contemporary Music.
Collins argues that even the label contemporary music wasn't neutral. It was shaped by institutional preferences, by politics, and by ideas of internationalism.
And this matters because it reminds us what counts as modern is always being defined by cultural forces.
Modernism isn't a fixed historical era, it's a moving target.
So when today's artists quote proof rock, they're participating in that ongoing redefinition. They're deciding what modernism means now.
A jazz musician quoting prog rock creates a different modernism than a filmmaker quoting it. A meme quoting prog rock creates yet another version of it.
And Collins helps us see that these differences aren't random. They're shaped by institutions, industries, audiences, and also cultural expectations.
So together, Valentine and Collins shows us that modernism isn't only about form or style, it's about context and translation.
Now let's bring these threads together. Why does prog rock keep reappearing in the modern art?
Because modern artists don't see it as a finished object. They see it as raw material for new expression, something they can bend, parody, criticize, celebrate, or reinvent.
Valentine tells us modernism moves across genres. Colin tells us definition of modern, change across institutions and politics.
Combine those ideas and we get this. Modernism survives not because it stays the same, but because artists keep reshaping it to address new cultural and emotional realities.
And that's why proof rock lives on. Not as Eliot's proof rock, but as ours. Whoever ours happens to be.
Every new reference is a new answer to the poem's old question. Do I dare disturb the universe?
Before we wrap up this episode, we want to explore one more unexpected angle. What happens when we look beyond literature and think about how other art forms get reinterpreted over time?
Because while proof rock keeps coming up in film and music, something similar has been happening in a totally different space.
Yeah, and that something is jazz.
Right. The thing is, jazz isn't just a musical genre anymore. It's become a cultural language that gets reimagined in the same way modernist texts do.
When you think about it, jazz and literally modernism come from almost the exact same historical moment, from the early 20th century. They both were born out of turbulence. They fractured the old norms and they embraced the new, innovative, and they embraced the emotional improvisation.
Not only that, but both these movements had to fight against misunderstanding and prejudice.
But here's the extremely interesting part. Unlike some literary movements that feel finished, jazz never really went away. It kept mutating, observing new technologies, cultures, and even politics.
Just like modernism.
If you listen to hip-hop producers sampling Miles Davis or electronic artists reworking Coltrane harmonies, you're hearing something that echoes modernism's own techniques.
Exactly. Sampling is basically the musical version of what Eliot was doing, quoting. He was collaging and stitching fragments into new shapes. He was taking out the old poems and joining them into his ones.
If you listen to hip-hop producers sampling Miles Davis or electronic artists reworking Coltrane harmonies, you're hearing something that echoes modernists' own techniques.
Exactly. Sampling is basically the musical version of what Eliot was doing, quoting, collaging, and stitching fragments of old poems into his ones. And the exact same thing was later done to the prog rock itself.
But the remake isn't passive, it's active. When Kendrick Lamar layers jazz instrumental on the lyrics about surveillance, policing, and black identity, he's doing what modernist writers did with myth, using old forms to decode new crises.
And that's the key similarity. Both modernists and modern jazz artists use recomposition as a way to comment on their culture.
Pulling from our prior conversation, Sarah Collins reminds us that institutions shape what counts as modern or contemporary. This idea relates to jazz as well.
In the mid-19th century, elite institutions started treating jazz as high art, something to be preserved, limited, and authenticated. But the communities that made jazz were still reinventing it on the grounds in clubs and jam sessions, making it less elite and open for everyone.
This tension mirrors what happens to modernist literature as culture keeps breaking the glass and evolving to use it. However, education keeps trying to refrain.
And that's why jazz survives, not because it's protected, but because it's constantly reinterpreted, often by people outside of the institutions that claim to define it.
There is also the stereotype around both modernism and jazz. Not only they are elite, they're also difficult and intellectual.
But those stereotypes collapse as soon as you look at how people actually use them.
The intellectuality is real. Both jazz and modernism invite complex interpretation, but it's not exclusive. It's a toolkit, not a gate.
That's the irony. The more difficult these art forms are supposed to be, the more freely people end up reworking them and using them in their everyday culture.
So why do both jazz and modernism feel so contemporary, even though they're over a century old each?
Because they both encode a mindset that's still ours. Self-conscious, fractured, improvisational, anxious, searching.
Modern artists reinvent modernist literature. Jazz musicians reinvent jazz, and the result is the same. Old forms become mirrors for new worlds. That's it for this episode of Modern Echoes. Thank you for diving with us into the strange, surprising afterlives of prog rock.
In our next episode, we'll explore another modernist work reinvented by contemporary artists, so stay tuned.
Before we go, we want to give credit where it's due.
We want to give a big shout out to Joe Tech for providing the technology and the building in which this recording was able to take place, as well as English 1102 for giving us the opportunity to actually make this recording and share it and talk about modernism, jazz, and everything in between. Thank you very much.